and welcome to 30 Days of Hoya. Today we will talk about this Hoya Macrophylla. You can see Hoya Macrophylla standing right next to me. This is quite a big plant and I cannot take credit for growing it all myself. It was fairly large when I bought it, but it did grow as well in my care. Now you may see that there are some tiny pieces of paper around the vines, and those are just there because I marked the vines which I wanted to cut to further propagate. So you may see bits of paper on a vine or two. Hoya Macrophylla is native to Southeast Asia, to Indonesia and Malaysia. And this is a Hoya that prefers those intermediate temperatures. So somewhere from 15 to 35 degrees of Celsius. So anywhere from 60 to 95 degrees of Fahrenheit. Now I don't think this Hoya would mind too much if you would keep it around 20-23 degrees of Celsius. And those are the temperatures that I've kept this Hoya under. You can see how this Hoya looks like in one camera, and then in the second frame you can see a bit more of that height of the plant, and you will also see some of the leaves. There is a peduncle here. You can see a peduncle here. It doesn't have any buds on it. There is one more peduncle up there on the plant, but this plant is quite tall. So let me just try. You can see the second peduncle here. It does have some buds on it. So I think this one will bloom again very soon. This Hoya bloomed for me for the first time this winter on 2 peduncles. The flowers are very cute to see. They're very small compared to the size of the leaves and the entire plant, but I did not detect any scent to the flower. I did get pretty close, but I just couldn't smell anything, and maybe the second time around they will develop more fragrance. If some of you have this Hoya and you bloomed it, please let me know. Does it really smell like something? Because I cannot smell it. And sometimes when I smell something that's very faint, I'm not sure if I'm imagining the smell of that or is it really smelling like something. So please let me know in the comments if this one actually does smell, because I really could not detect any scent coming from the plant. In terms of light, I did keep this in my northwest facing window, and it did fairly well there. It did not grow a lot in those conditions, and definitely it did not bloom there. More towards the winter, I moved it next to my Hoya shelf with LED lights, and this wasn't sitting directly under the LED light, but it was to the side of the LED light. And it actually did produce a lot of new growth, and that's when it bloomed for me. Now, I would say this one would definitely require some bright light, and I did notice that they do bloom well under the LED light, and I think that's because the light is constant throughout the day. If you are going to put it in a window, maybe east-facing window will do really well, because an east-facing window the light is not too strong and it's usually constant throughout the day. In terms of water, I do water this every 10 to 12 days, and that is really just because it's in a very big pot and I don't want to overwater it. You will notice that the leaves will go a bit softer, and I actually just watered this yesterday. The leaves were a bit limp, sorry for that. So you do need to pay attention to how the leaves look. The back side of the leaf will also go a bit wrinkly. I usually not wait until that moment. I try to water them a bit earlier. During the winter, my temperatures were around 23-24 degrees of Celsius constantly, so this one needed watering every 7 days. This one is also in terracotta pot, which will also pull the moisture away from the roots and from the potting media. Now, when we talk about the potting media or the potting mix, this one has bark, perlite, cocoa peat, and a bit of regular potting mix. At the time when I was repotting this one, because it did come to me in cocoa peat or some type of peat, I did not use lacquite at that point, nor ceramis, but feel free to add those as well, because they will make your mix lighter and more airy. That's what I will do the next time. I'm not sure if I'm going to repot it again or will I just replace some of the soil. I do hope this will be the final pot. Obviously, it's a good grower, but my space is limited, so I cannot let it grow as much as it wants. I will simply have to cut it back at some point again. When it comes to fertilizing, I fertilize it once a week, both in winter and in summer. In summer, I will just use the regular dose of the orchid fertilizer or algamic. and then in winter I will double that down. You may need to withdraw your fertilizer if it's not growing in a bright room or if it's not growing under LED light, which is fine. You will just have to look at your Hoya and see if it's still growing actively or not. And of course, that is the way to know if you need to fertilize it or not. When it comes to humidity, I never had issues with this one. I did read that some people believe it needs more humidity. My humidity is constantly at around 60%, so it does well in those conditions. I still wouldn't put it in crazy low humidity, like 30 or something like that. You might get away with it, I'm not quite sure, but I keep it in some moderate humidity, and I think it will do well in those conditions too. If you notice that some of the newer leaves are falling off and you know it is watered, or the tips of the vines are dying off, that is usually the indication that it needs more humidity. So be mindful of that. I recently chatted with my friend who also grows Hoya, but in a different country, and she has the same Hoya Macrophylla with white or yellowish margins. She cuts them back quite frequently because she likes to sell them, and I do cut back my Macrophylla as well. But out of her Macrophyllas, she recently got a reversed variegation. So you can see that this one has the yellow, green, or whitish margins, which will depend from time to time. Her Hoya Macrophylla did something that's quite interesting, so it reversed the variegation. So the inside is light green, and then the outside is with darker green color. So I do hope that happens to me. I would love to see it as well. I think it's quite interesting. Of course, this variegation is also beautiful. It's different on each leaf. Sometimes you will have more, sometimes you will have less, and that will probably depend on the light, I would say. Some leaves are larger, some are not. I do notice that the shapes of the leaves also vary. Sometimes they will be more elongated, sometimes they will be more rounder. Sometimes they will get quite big. Now, I do have some big leaves that grew in my conditions, but there is a leaf from this Hoya which it arrived with. It's absolutely huge, and I will show that to you now. It's kind of heavy. You can see this is just insanely big, and then in the second frame, this leaf, I would say, is longer than 20 centimeters. It's just crazy how long it is and how big this is. It's really a massive leaf. And that just tells me that you probably will need a lot of space for this Hoya. So if you're tight on space, maybe look into something that's smaller, or you may need to cut it back a lot. I would say you will be able to find this Hoya in Europe in some of the garden centers. It's not very frequent that you will be able to find it, but if you look hard enough, or if you are like me and you visit your garden store or your flower shop all the time, you might run into this and get it. Otherwise, you can get it from a collector, and there are also different cultivars. So the one that has the yellow inside and then the green margins, there is a splash version, and then some other cultivars as well. If you already have some Hoyas and you are able to get this one, I would definitely recommend it. It really is not that difficult, but you just be a bit mindful about watering. So not too much and not too little is always the perfect place. Now, it's a bit difficult to find that right spot, but when you do, you will see that really this is a no-fuss Hoya at all. Thank you for watching. This was Hoya Macrophylla, and I will see you in our next video.